Back on the 12th of August, we had our second fatal accident at Ryan Field, Montana, this time November 30 Sierra Gulf, an RV-7A 180 horsepower aircraft. The solo pilot was fatally injured when he clipped a tree on a go-around off of runway 15 at Ryan Field. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the BLANCOLIRIO channel, and as you know, we stopped in Ryan Field on our way to Oshkosh earlier this year. I have some first-hand account information of this particular accident of the RV-7A, and the tree that he clipped may very well have been this tree shown here in this video of the UL Cub departing from Ryan Field earlier this year. If we look at what I believe to be the same tree in a still taken from a video shot after the accident, we see this tree is now clipped. Thank you, patrons who support this channel here on Patreon that make this content possible. Ryan Field is located way up here in northern Montana above Flathead Lake at the 3,660-foot elevation, 2,500-foot long grass runway, restricted private airfield. If we click on the data for the airfield, we see that it is the Recreational Aviation Foundation is the organization that you need to contact before going into this airfield and obtain the mandatory safety briefing. The Recreational Aviation Foundation is one of the groups that's out there that improves, preserves, and creates airstrips for recreational purposes. They are the folks that allow us to continue to have access to these backcountry airstrips. In order to join the Recreational Aviation Foundation, all it takes is a donation. Once you donate to the RAF, you then have access to all the information about all these airfields and where they're located. And this is the information on Ryan Field. And it's a wonderful place to go airplane camping or backcountry flying. But before you can go into Ryan Field, you have to join the RAF and then sign the fact that you have reviewed this safety briefing right here with your name and your N number and give that information to the RAF. And you can do that right here online. And here on the safety briefing, it reminds you that you've got to review this briefing guide before you go to this airfield. And it's got a lot of important information like the slope of the runway. The runway itself has quite a bit of a ski slope to it on both ends. It gives you the recommended way of landing at this airport. And this briefing also reminds you that you need to be thoroughly familiar with mountain flying techniques, slow flight, and safe procedures for primitive airstrip operations. Because as you can see, this airport is cut out of some very tall timber and surrounded by high terrain. The 80-year-old pilot of this aircraft, based out of Minden, Nevada, is well known up there in the Minden, Nevada area. And he comes from a Navy background, former Navy fighter pilot, I believe, and he's owned this aircraft for about 7 years. Now, this aircraft is not the ideal backcountry aircraft, but it is capable of backcountry flying, and I understand at the time of the accident, the wheel pants were removed from this aircraft to help it out with the grass runway operations. And if we look at the recent history here on FlightAware, we can see the pilots flying quite a bit there in the Minden Tahoe area, which is fairly high elevation, and then it looks like they took off on this adventure up into the Idaho backcountry, Caldwell, and then on up to Johnson Creek, Idaho, a very popular backcountry airstrip, and then on up towards Kalispell, Montana, where the accident happened on the 12th of August. And if we look at the ADS-B exchange data, pretty limited data at the site of the accident, but it looks like there was at least one go-around. And according to the eyewitness report, the first go-around was just kind of a look-see pass for the pilot to check out the runway and the conditions of the runway before committing to a landing. The landing at the time of the accident, the aircraft did make it all the way down to the ground and basically did a touch and go. Bounced slightly on the landing. The pilot didn't like the bounce and elected to go around on runway 15, landing to the south. And here's what runway 15 looks like at Ryan Field. Again, it's cut out of some very tall timber, Now, this was us earlier in the season in the UL Cub, taking off out of there. And when an instructor gets after you for center line, this is why it's so important that you maintain center line, especially in these backcountry operations. You've got trees on both the left and the right of you. These trees are very close to the left edge of the runway. And these trees are very close to the right edge of the runway. And I believe if I slow this thing down, I suspect it's one of these trees on the right, probably that one right there, that the pilot clipped on his go-around. Now, if we review this video posted on Facebook by my friend Jughead, John Consul, this is landing on runway 33, the opposite direction, and here's where we see that tree now clipped. Both of these videos shot from nearly the same location here by the sign-in post. You can get an idea of the ski slope runway at this point of the runway on 3-3. This is a Cessna 185, rolling it on there at the very beginning of the runway, down the ski slope, and then bringing her to a stop with plenty of room left over. He's used less than half of the runway, probably a third of the runway. Here's a video I shot, or Kellen shot, of me coming into Ryan. There's that tree in before the accident. And the 185 did a better job than I did, getting her down and getting her stopped. But I didn't want to drag it in over the trees there, bring it in a little higher approach. But now you got to get down into this hole here. And want to touch down right about here and allow the uphill slope to catch me. A little too fast in the Carbon Cub. Roll it on right there. Again, that tree is still in one piece. But still, plenty of room left over. But the chances of a go-around from this direction are greatly reduced compared to landing the other direction. This is why you normally want to land and take off on runway 15, because it improves your chances for a go-around. But if you're going to go around, you've got to maintain center line. And that's why we're after you as a student pilot to stay on the center line. That's why it's so darn important. Of course, you can't see a center line here in a grass airfield, but you can certainly imagine it with these well-marked white cones delineating the edge of the runway. You've got to stay on center line. And you cannot allow your aircraft to drift once you're airborne. That's simply sloppy flying, and it'll get you killed in the backcountry. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here.